This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reif Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
To me, it's one of 82. The bottom line is we gave up 5 special team goals. I mean, we gave up 4 power play goals and a shorty. That was the game. I could have handled the rest of it, no problem. Walk away 2 points, but just the fact that we gave up those special team goals. That's the part I'm a little irked about. So, yeah, we have to shore that up for sure.
Shore it up. Man, you got the sense after that game last night to the Buffalo Sabres, where the Lightning lost 8-7, that the players were really pointing out the positives in that game rather than giving up 8 goals and losing to a team who's right there with them now for first place in the Atlantic. It is Power Lunch on Lightning Radio. Greg Linnelli along with the radio voice of the Lightning, Dave Mishkin. And we heard, partner, from a couple of players in Coop there that they really, respected the fight and, no pun intended, and the energy that was brought. And that, we gave up some goals. We'll get that corrected. It's not a problem. And I understand that. I get what they were saying publicly. I have a hard time thinking the team was not disturbed by the fact that they gave up as many goals as they did, albeit, a decent amount on the special teams from that perspective. Regardless, you give up 8 and it's like, okay, we've been leaking here. We need to figure some things out. And instead the message after the game was, look, we didn't love our kill. The best kill happened to be the full 5-on-3 for
Amazing.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
But we really lacked in that area. But I really liked how the team came together. We'll be fine. We'll get that fixed and things like that. And, we stuck up for one another. And it's almost, you felt like that's what they took out of that game more so than, look, let's be frank. It was another game where, you're just not defending the way you need to be, or the way they were defending before the break is what most people would look at. And I found that to be an interesting observation. And I'm not sure where you come down on it, but there's no question the game had everything last night, including a ton of goals and a lot of fights and the blood boiling over from a previous game. I think that's all entertaining. It's all good, but it still hasn't corrected the fact that the Lightning's game is off.
Well, their game is off. And by the way, we can recap both games this weekend, where the Lightning ended their losing streak with a win on Saturday in Toronto. So last night's game, from the Lightning's perspective only, and even from Buffalo's perspective too, it was a mixed bag. There was some good and there was some bad, and that was true for both teams. It ends up being more good for Buffalo because the Sabres ended up rallying and winning the game. And for a fan base that hasn't seen a playoff game for their team in 15 years, and they're going to make the playoffs this year, they very well may get in first place. This was a mano-a-mano game. Both teams came in tied atop the division. For a game like that to happen in Buffalo, that's got to be one of the more memorable games that Sabres fans have seen in their building in quite some time. Not just how it was played, but the significance of the game in terms of 2 top teams in the division. So both teams had some good and some bad. But even beyond that, the entertainment value of this game was extremely high. And this is coming from somebody who, is calling the game for, the losing team, right? It was a very bitter pill to swallow for the Lightning in the last 10 minutes of the third period, because they blew a 7-5 lead and lost in regulation. They didn't even get a point. But that doesn't take away from the fact, this was an extraordinarily entertaining game. It had a lot of everything. Coaches pull their hair out sometimes with, scoring chances against, but there were a lot of scoring chances for both teams. There was snarl to the game. Yep. There were a lot of fights. We can get into that. There's a lot of nastiness, so emotion. It's not so much the nastiness and the fighting, but it was that emotions ran high, which fed into the intensity level on the ice. That's what made it so entertaining. It was not a defensive clinic, far from it, obviously. And I think both teams understand they're going to have to play better defensively against each other and against other teams. So This is how I look at this game. I almost put this game in a little bit of a separate bucket from some of these other games where the Lightning have struggled defensively, which, look, I've been leading the charge, Greg, with you about, like, they need to defend better. They're not going to go anywhere unless they defend better. This is an area of the game that is the most important to fix. I know they won a couple of games, but they only scored 1 goal in each. I'm like, defense, 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 defense. Even winning in Toronto, it's like they need to be better defensively. They had some defensive problems last night. But I feel like last night's game, it was a singular sort of game. And this is what I wrote in Extra Shift. This was a momentum game. And you had two teams that were dealing offensively. And when one team got momentum, the other team was almost incapable of stopping them from getting scoring chances. That was the sort of game it was. So the Sabres got a lot of momentum in the first 30 minutes, let's say, 25 to 30 minutes. They got a bunch of power plays. They didn't score on their 2-minute 5-on-3, which bucked Phil's rule, which he's always one to say, if you don't score on a long 5-on-3, you usually lose the game. They had a great night in the power play. They only didn't score on 3 opportunities. 2 of them came right at the beginning of the game where they had a 2-minute 5-on-3, didn't score. Then they went power play goal, power play goal, power play goal, double minor on Hagel, power play goal. The second half they didn't score, and then they got the one at the end of the game. Power play goal. They finished 4 for 7. They built their lead because their power play was humming. And they were able to ride the momentum of getting the benefit, I will say that, of the calls in the first period plus. I'm not saying the Lightning didn't deserve the penalties that they got, but the officials decided to call it a certain way. There was a reason why, and it's not a slam dunk reason in my mind, there was a reason why they gave the Sabres a 2-minute 5-on-3 at the beginning of the game. Okay, Radish took a penalty. Fair. That's a 2-minute minor. Why is Hagel getting the only other penalty? It was roughing. There was a lot of roughing going on. Dahlin got a 5-minute fighting major with Radish, but that was a choice the officials made. The Hagel double minor, we can get into this. I was pretty outspoken when Forsling was punching Moser on the ice right before the Olympic break. I'm not a fan of players, in a fight punching another player when they are on the ice.
With the glove on.
With the glove on, too. Yeah. Hagel has been on the receiving end of a punch with a glove in the 100%. Preseason. So, look, we're going to be consistent here. I have to say, I wasn't crazy about how that unfolded. But Dahlin has been involved in a lot of stuff. This wasn't some isolated incident where Hagel just blew his top. It was Dahlin again.
Yeah.
Dahlin injures Gonçalves. Dahlin gives a cheap shot to Point. Dahlin high-sticked Hagel. I mean, I don't think it was flagrant, but he got the stick up. It was the stick blade. It hit Hagel in the face. That's why he blew his top. So you're kind of like, all right, you want to give Hagel a double minor. What about the high stick on Dahlin?
Yeah, right.
They could have made it they still would have scored on the first power play, I guess. But they decided to give the Sabres 2 power plays there. So the Sabres got, I will say, the benefit of some calls based on the fact that the first 30 minutes of that game, or 25 minutes, was extremely rough. We had 5 fights in the first period plus 6 seconds of the second. So the Sabres got their lead. The Lightning grabbed momentum back. And in the second half of the second period, into the beginning of the third, the Sabres could not do a thing to stop the Lightning. The Lightning had momentum, and they were dominating action. And they ended up scoring. Tuck got a shorthanded goal. But the Lightning ended up scoring 5 of the next 6 goals in a fairly short period of time. So, the Sabres, Lindy Ruff is talking about this, but nobody in Buffalo was talking about the fact that, the Sabres were hemorrhaging goals during a stretch in this game because they came back and won it, right? They got their 2 points, and there was a lot of positive. But there was negative there for Buffalo. Like, they took a gut punch. They took a punch to the jaw, figuratively, and they didn't respond. They had nothing going. You get the power play goal from Kucherov after Perry scored. But you get the power play goal from Kucherov. They come back. Gergenson's even strength goal. Moser even strength goal. Kucherov goal in the opening minute of the third. And then Point they called it an own goal. I kind of disagreed with that because Point did swing at the puck and was pushing it toward the net. But that's 5 goals out of 6. So momentum really helped the Lightning. And this is just me personally saying this. I heard what Coop said. He's like, we lost the game because we didn't take care of business special teams wise. That's fair. But 4 of those 5 special teams goals they allowed happened before they rallied. So to me, the biggest goal in the game, by far, the biggest goal in the game was the one scored by Sam Carrick. Now, that goal made it, 6-5 Lightning. But that lit the match for the Sabres. In a way, the same way that Perry's goal helped the Lightning. And that was an inexcusable defensive mistake for the Lightning. You're up 6-4. You've just scored the 6th goal. And it's one of your best defensive defensemen, McDonough, steps up in the neutral zone to check Zach Benson, and then Sabrin also checks Benson. So if McDonough is going to step up, Sabrin, easy for me to say, but Sabrin needs to cover for him. And Benson took the hit and made the play. Now you want to say Johansson should have had that one? I mean, it was a pretty good shot from Carrick, even though he's on his strong side, but it's a 2-on-1. Why are you giving up a 2-on-1? You're up 6-4. And I understand the Lightning got a 7th goal from Hagel to go up 7-5, but I felt once Carrick scored, it was like the Sabres got reignited. Like their offense woke up. And they were dangerous the rest of the third period. I think we came out of the middle TV timeout of the third period, Greg, and I was like, it's 7-5, but it feels like we got a long way to go in this game. Like, there are 8 some odd minutes on the side. It feels like 28 minutes are left. Because the Sabres, like, every time they got the puck, they were dangerous. We weren't seeing that during that stretch when the Lightning had momentum. So I'm not saying it was, like, bound to happen, but momentum really helped Buffalo. And then the Lightning made some critical defensive mistakes that led to some glorious chances, and Johansson couldn't stop them. I'm talking about goal 6 and goals 5, 6, and 7. That were all even strength for Buffalo. The 3 goals they scored even strength were goals 5, 6, and 7. Those were very, very important goals. I have to be honest, I didn't see a clean replay of it. I wasn't crazy about the call on Gergensons near the end of the game. Not that it wasn't maybe a penalty, and Lightning made a mistake there. Holmberg goes for a hip check. Austin gets around him, has a path to the net. You might say, okay, maybe he denied a scoring chance. We saw a lot happening in the final 30 minutes of that game, and a lot happening in the third period. We didn't see one penalty called. So the Sabres got the benefit of a call there. I'm not saying it wasn't a slash, but look at the context of the game. Power plays at that point became 7-2 Buffalo. And they're like, thank you very much. We've just scored 2 in a row to tie. We got momentum. Our power play has been rolling. Lightning had a chance to clear it. Gord kind of mishandles it, stays in the zone. Dahlin takes a shot. Zucker, this guy kills the Lightning. Going back to his days in Minnesota, he always plays well against the Lightning, one of these guys. He's a good player, too. He had 2 goals in the game, but he tips the shot. That's why it goes off the post, comes right to Doan on the rebound. He's got an open net. 8-7. It was one of those games where it's like the horses left the barn and they weren't going back in the barn, except when the Lightning had that lead in the third period, early third. Like the Sabres were quiet. They were quiet.
There was a lot of talk coming out of the game that they were better 5-on-5 than the Sabres.
Greg,
I don't know if you want to quibble
5,
with
6,
that.
and 7. But goals 5, 6, and 7 were all even strength goals for Buffalo. Yeah. So I think, yes, overall for the whole game, the Lightning scored more 5-on-5 goals than Buffalo. But I'm not really looking at that as much. I'm saying, what direction was the wind blowing? And the wind started blowing in the Lightning's face after Carrick scored the 5th Buffalo goal. The Sabres are a team, and in some ways, they're very much like the Lightning. Brian Engblom talks about the Lightning this way. They're a feel team. Like when something good happens, they like grab onto that and they ride that wave of momentum. And I think the Lightning did that in the game last night, but so did the Sabres. And the thing I wrote in Extra Shift, it was almost like one of these games where last goal wins. And the Sabres got the last goal. And that was the difference. Like in terms of the standings, in terms of the Lightning's trajectory, now 2-5 coming out of the break. I mean, it's not ideal, obviously, to lose a game in regulation. teams behind the Lightning are getting closer. They are. I mean, we're not blind to what's happening in the standings and in the Eastern Conference. But the reality is, the Lightning need one win in the next 8 games to get to playoff pace for this 10-game segment. So they're still in very, very good shape. The overwhelming likelihood is they're going to get into the playoffs. And look, they may play the Sabres. I think it would be a great playoff matchup because both teams can skate, both teams can attack. It's going to be a challenge to see which team can slow up the other. The Lightning have a game tomorrow, by the way, against a team that also slices them up with their speed and their rush chance capabilities, Columbus. We saw that the last time the teams met. So coming out of this Buffalo game, it would behoove the Lightning to tighten things up in terms of their rush coverage because even though, yes, 5 of their 8 goals came on special teams, Tuck's goal was a breakaway, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was a shorthanded goal. Zucker scores on a breakaway. The Carrick goal, 2-on-1. Those were all off the rush. So, and the Sabres had other dangerous looks off the rush that didn't go in.
Sure.
So I think that was probably, their biggest defensive problem 5-on-5. And then obviously their penalty kill, which has been terrific all year, couldn't come up with the goods last night. But momentum had something to do with that. I think the Sabres got on a roll and in terms of their power play, and the Lightning couldn't stop it. You give up 4 power play goals, you're gonna have a hard time winning the game.
Speaking of
bottom line.
Speaking of stopping it, we have some questions, and I don't want this to consume the show because Jonas Johansson has been very good for a while for Tampa Bay. But Chris says JoJo's last 4 starts, 1, 5, 6, and 8 goals allowed. 884 save percentage on the year. No matter how the team in front of him is playing, he has to be better and make a save.
So his numbers have not been great since the break, honestly. I mean, he had the game in Carolina. He had the game in Columbus. The Lightning were awful in that game. They weren't great against Carolina, and they gave up. I mean, remember the goals that Carolina was scoring in the first period, 2-on-1 tap-ins? Really tough for Johansson. Last night, the chances the Sabres got on which the Sabres scored, there was not a weak goal of the 8. Some were more dangerous than others, though. So I think what Chris had in there, give them a save. The first Doan goal. That's a very good shot. He walks out of the corner. He puts it up in the upper corner. I'm not saying it's far from an easy save, but it's not a breakaway. It's not like the Tuck breakaway or the Zucker breakaway, right? So he faced varying degrees of different sorts of chances. And the first Zucker goal that's across a feed, he has no shot on that. It was similar to the Kucherov goal in the third period. Luukkonen had no chance on that. That one's not on him. The Doan goal at the end of the game. I mean, I don't know what you're supposed to do there. The shot from the point is tipped. So it changes directions. It hits the post and comes right to their guy. That's not the goalie's fault. You want to say okay, stop the Carrick shot. Fair enough, but it's a 2-on-1. So I'm kind of agreeing with Chris's point that maybe you need 1 or 2 saves on some of those chances, but they were legit chances the Sabres had.
I think this is more about they gave up 8, not necessarily looking at each goal to see if it was JoJo's fault or not, and just coming with the outcome. You give up 8, you didn't have a good game. It's hard to excuse, and the team in general. I mean, it's hard to excuse.
We talked about this postgame. Are you excusing Luukkonen? Luukkonen got the win, but did he play well? I mean, what were the final shots in the game?
I didn't come. Let's put it this way: I didn't come away thinking he stole that one.
Well, of course not. But
right.
Johansson had a better save percentage last night than Luukkonen, even though he gave up 1 more goal. Johansson made 34 saves. Luukkonen made 21 saves.
And I think Johansson made some difficult saves, by the way. I mean, that could have been
speaks to the Lightning had some problems when the Sabres got rolling.
So, and I'm very hesitant. We've done the show enough together when it comes to the backups to really critique them too much. I think their numbers are going to be pretty ugly anyways. I think they get some tough circumstances. They could be that second game of a back-to-back.
The next one that's coming up is a second half of a back-to-back. I mean, Johansson might theoretically play before this game, but the Lightning in a couple of weekends, have a back-to-back at Edmonton on Saturday, at Calgary on Sunday. It's another game gap of 22 hours.
Yeah.
End of a road trip again. I know Calgary is going to miss the playoffs this year, but it's not like they're incapable of beating the opponent. I think they just beat Carolina. Carolina a bit on a roll. They won in Calgary. So that, if it's going to be Johansson's start, that's going to be a tough start again. I don't know if he's going to get a game between now and then. But
yeah, I give the, not a pass, but I'm maybe more sympathetic to his plight as a goaltender and the numbers. I come away with the eye test. I think he's been solid. We've taken some questions that I haven't posted on here, partner, about they need to look long-term at a better backup. And the reason being because, Vasi has played a lot of hockey, but you need maybe somebody a little bit younger who can take more of a load off of Vasi. That's probably for another show, another discussion.
And
JoJo's been fine.
Yeah, like
he's Lightning, been fine.
When the Lightning went 15-3, Johansson was great. He gave them a lot of wins. When they went 19-1-1, okay, the one was that Columbus loss. But Johansson won a lot of games during the 19-1-1.
I've liked him a lot. I think in terms of a backup and playing behind Vasi and what you expect from him, I'm okay. Look, there were 5 big issues, you could say, last night with the Lightning. Maybe Johansson was number 5 on that list, or maybe 6 or 7. I just there were more to it than that. But I acknowledge, look, If you give up 10 runs as a starting pitcher, but only 2 of them were earned, you could come away and say, well, look, I didn't get any help defensively. Mm-hmm. But you gave up 10, and that's what people were going to look at. So you're not going to run away from it.
Before you get to another question or a question.
Yes, please.
I just want to say this, because this was a game Lightning fans were like, how do they lose that game? They're now in second place. There's a lot to look at and feel not great about, okay? I actually liked some stuff that I saw both last night and over the weekend. So this is one person's opinion. I thought the weekend, it's not like anyone else was talking about it that I heard. I'm just giving you my opinion. I think the 2 games this weekend were the 2 best games Victor Hedman has played this year. Now, it happened to coincide with him playing with Chernak on Saturday, and then Chernak had to leave after a fight with Kesselring where he got tackled and landed on his shoulder or his arm. I'm guessing that's what happened. He didn't play the final 2 periods, so the Lightning are down to 5D. So Hedman played with a lot of different players. That is as good as Victor Hedman has looked to me all year. So we've had a lot of fans comment about what's wrong with Hedman. We had a fan suggest that he should be pulled out of the lineup. I think you and I said more reps, not fewer reps. They gave him more to bite. He actually led the Lightning in ice time against the Leafs. They didn't have a huge minute game because they were up. But, he played more than anyone else, even Radish, in that Toronto game by smidge. And I really liked his game. Now, was he perfect defensively? The Lightning had some issues defensively. But I'm looking about how confident Victor looked with the puck, plays he was making, reading the play, nice passes tape to tape. He wasn't really getting into trouble a lot in the defensive zone, I thought. So that was one guy. And I actually think that this guy has struggled a little bit since the break, and that's Destu, relative to where he had been before the break. And part of it is that, he missed some time. So, he had to get back in the swing of things. And look, I know he got caught on the 7-7 goal. Like, that was his guy. Zucker got behind him. But just in terms of like what we've seen from Destu this year that has been so impressive about Destu, like commanding the puck, making strong, decisive plays, finding little holes, being hard on the puck, erasing guys. Last night I saw the Destu that we had seen earlier in the year. So, from the standpoint what you were talking about at the top of the show, the Lightning were saying, we stuck up for each other, we stood up for each other. We heard that after they played the Panthers in the preseason, the end of the regular season, and had 1 win in 7 games. But this is a little different. I think that I liked the temperature going up for the Lightning because I think it helped them play better, which is kind of funny to say because they weren't great defensively. but I think there were parts of their game that were as good as we have seen since the break. And part of it is they were emotionally engaged.
Yeah,
in
I would
that
agree
game.
with that. Yeah.
But I also singled out a couple of guys as being, I noticed that they were really on top of things in terms of where their level is, and like the level went up. The level went up for Hedman this weekend. The level went up for Destu on Sunday. We'll see if they can carry that forward.
You know who was just looking for
And Perry's been great, too.
Yeah, he has.
Mention.
He's been very good. You know who was looking for something last night, too, and you could tell. I mean, Sorelli. I mean, he was just... He was ticked off. He's the guy, you've mentioned this, he pulls you into the fight.
Mm-hmm.
Those are games, somebody hits one of his teammates, he doesn't appreciate a whack. I mean, he was going after guys, you could tell.
Yeah.
And the engagement level was high.
The Lightning marked this game on the calendar even before the game arrived, where it was, 82 points and 82 points, because it is clear the Lightning were not happy. Capital N, capital H. Not happy with some of the stuff that went on in the game in Tampa. Beyond the score. I don't think that this was as much message sanding. I do think that, the standings position had something to do with it. But the Lightning were like, we had some stuff happen in the last game, and you guys are going to answer for this right now. Beginning of this game, it is happening.
I agree. I mean, I think that's
we
message
didn't notice
to
it
me.
as much, but the players did. And for Dan Heinold, he came on with me in the first intermission.
Yes.
And I asked him,
right,
kind of like walking the line between being physical and engaged and having this sort of game and not taking too many penalties. And he's like, yeah, you have to walk the line. But he's like, the bottom line is that, they took it to us and they, basically dirty plays. He actually said dirty plays or dirty cross checks.
He did.
Yeah. So he's like, we didn't like that. You guys were like, Heiner's ready to suit up, right? And he's like, I love it. But look, we're starting to see a little bit of a track record, if you can use that expression, but recent evidence of Dahlin doing stuff.
Yeah.
He injured Gage Gonsalves with a cross check. I don't know that he intended to injure him, but he cross-checked him, and Gonsalves went skates first into the boards. There is no doubt that whole issue with Point, where he fought Oslin and basically one-punched him, that all started because of Dahlin. And then when Point retaliated, Dahlin fell on the ice, right? That's why Oslin came in. And the whole situation with Malkin. So what Malkin did earned him a 5-game suspension. You can't do that. But why is Malkin doing that, right? So stuff happens sometimes that we can, the camera is there, we see it, but a lot of stuff might happen that we don't see. But the players know. The players know. And they went into that game last night, the Lightning, like
they were ready.
Everything else aside, we are going to settle some of the stuff that we didn't like that happened 8 days ago.
They did. I mean, is it going to go away? Probably not. I saw some people.
They weren't happy with Kesselring. I mean, I was kind of like, Kesselring fell on James's leg.
Yeah.
Which it's not like he intended to hurt James, but James gave him a little. I mean, honestly, easy for me to say, but he took a penalty. He cross-checked James. James didn't like it. Reaches behind him and basically tapped him on the helmet. And Kesselring, fell down, right? So I don't think that he intended to injure James. But the Lightning were like, why are you doing that? Like, why are you flopping on a play like that and in the process injuring for 10 weeks?
Broke our guy's leg.
If that's what it was.
Yeah, right. Whatever it is.
So, look, Chernak wanted a piece of Kesselring. Unfortunately, it wasn't really much of a fight. They just wrestled, and Kesselring, threw him to the ice.
Right.
But the Lightning weren't happy with that guy either. So, anyway, that's some of what we saw at the beginning of the game that led to the temperature going up. But I think the temperature going up actually, even though they lost the game, I'm not certain that this is a bad thing moving forward. The result wasn't there last night. The penalty kill struggled. They blew a lead. Defensively, they had more problems against a very talented offensive team, too, that can hurt you. But this is why there were some positives the players were taking out of it. It wasn't like the Columbus game where they got poleaxed 8-2 and they're
It's
just
almost
like,
like
all right,
results
flush
be
this one.
damned. Results be damned.
Because
I like the way we competed.
They did have some jam to their game.
A
They
lot of jam.
rallied. They pushed back.
Yeah.
And
For
some
sure.
of their main guys really stepped up last night in a good way. So,
And did we mention Hagel got fined $5K?
yes.
Okay, we did mention that. I just want to make sure it's. Chris says this is interesting. Darlene is sneaky dirty for sure. Had issues with the Bolts, Malkin, Matthews a few years ago. Another one I am forgetting. So I bet you if you polled some players around the league,
I didn't actually really
confirm.
think of Darlene that way. What I
didn't
remember
either.
is
I
when
didn't
he
either.
came into the league, he needed to mature. Like he needed to mature physically. I don't mean like mature in terms of his, behavior, but like as a player, he needed to get bigger, stronger, and more seasoned. And it was a few years ago he hit that point. Even as the Sabres were missing the playoffs, it was clear Darlene had taken a huge step forward. In my opinion, he is one of, he's not in the Makar kind of Quinn Hughes class, but he for sure is their top defenseman, and I would say he is one of the top defensemen in the NHL. He is. Look at that goal that he scored last night.
I wouldn't disagree. I wouldn't disagree.
He is
with
a
you.
fantastic player, and he's really grown into, a different player than when he was 18 and 19, which makes sense. So I didn't really think of him as a guy who was, as Chris put it, quote unquote, sneaky dirty. But now we're starting to see retaliation, right? He's getting punished in a retaliatory way. And that's what's getting caught on camera. Sometimes the first play
sure.
isn't. I actually didn't even see a replay of what he did to Malkin. I just saw the Malkin
Right, when
reaction. Yeah.
And
Anyway.
I think with the Darlene, I don't think it's anything egregious. I think he must be getting under their skin and doing something.
And that may be part of it.
But look, here's what I will say, and I'll leave this point, and we'll get some more questions. If you are going to start earning that reputation, you better be ready to answer. Like guys are going to come after you, and if you don't drop the gloves to settle it, it's just going to keep lingering. It's going to keep lingering and going and going. So I don't anticipate him changing his game unless it becomes detrimental to his play.
Yeah.
Anthony says, just play smart when you got the 7th goal. Cooper is allergic to timeouts. What do you think of that one?
Well, look, by the time they got the 7th goal, I felt the Sabres, the match had been lit for them. They were more dangerous. Like at 6-5, you had that feeling like this is not over by a long stretch. And the Hagel goal at 7-5 came, I think, just shy of the halfway point. So they still had 10 minutes left. And they were every time they got the puck, they were coming. The 7-6 goal, which was a big goal, they had an ozone sequence, and I think it was Gergensons and Holmberg collided. Like, it wasn't I called it a pick. It really wasn't a pick, but one of them was with one of the Sabres. The other one was with Darlene, and the Sabre skated to the middle of the ice. I'm not sure who was with whom, but let's just say Gergensons was with the Sabre that wasn't Darlene, and Holmberg was with Darlene. The Sabre and Gergensen skated to the middle, and Holmberg basically skated right into them and bumped into Gergensons. That opened the lane for Darlene. He's a smart player, right? He went right to the net on his offside, and he had a nice finish there. So that was one of the rare. That was the only even strength goal the Lightning allowed that was not off the rush. They only allowed 3, but that was a D zone mistake, which they had some of those in the game. But yes, Coop tends not to call timeout. Very occasionally he will. If things are getting out of control, when he has a lead to work with and the other team is chipping away, I don't really remember seeing him use a timeout.
Yeah, I don't.
You also get the TV timeouts. So, you're aware of that as well. Like next whistle, we got a TV timeout. That'll basically be the same as it's longer. It's 90 seconds, not 30.
I don't get offended as many people do with the timeouts. I don't get offended that much when he's pulling the goaltender at different times that people are looking at it. So I trust John Cooper. This is part of it. He knows his team better than anybody, and I think you bring up a good point about TV timeouts. It's also a way to regroup, and he's got a veteran team as well that, I'm not saying it's not warranted,
Yeah.
But I'm not going to make a big deal about it. So I think, that's kind of where I'm coming down on it. Aaron says, Dave is like the inner dialogue in my head while watching games. Can sense when the Bolts are in trouble on rush or broken play, blood pressure up. Well, partner, I appreciate that because I think when you are doing play-by-play very well, you're listening to it, you are just on the edge of your seat if something's about to happen. You can tell based off of your tone, and I agree wholeheartedly.
I mean, ultimately, you sense danger.
You sense danger.
Yeah.
No doubt. This one comes from FKA322. Sabre fans need to be reminded their franchise has 0 cups. But you had mentioned the atmosphere was pretty good.
Yeah.
Correct?
I mean, look, I think Buffalo
Cool.
sports fans are great fans. Now, in fairness, when the Sabres have struggled in recent years, the building has been, let's just say, not full. Right. I've called a lot of games in there through the last several years where there have been a lot of empty seats. But look, that happens. When you don't make the playoffs for 15 years, it's hard to sell out the building every night.
Yeah.
But there's no question that their fans are very passionate sports fans. They are. And, a lot of former Sabres, they really love the Sabres. A lot of former Sabres, maybe they're not staying there in the winter, but they like going back in the summer. I know for years, I'm not sure if he still does, but Andrew Chuck would go back for the summer months. He had a place, if I'm remembering right. He told me that. So, look, if this is referring to anything online, I confess I haven't really we got back. I don't know what happened. I have a feeling Sabres fans are probably not thrilled with some of the fighting that was initiated, by the Lightning, which by initiate, I don't mean instigating, but the Lightning were looking to get involved. And the Hagel play with Dahlin certainly is, I know that has appeared on some clips. Many of those clips don't show Dahlin getting his stick blade into Hagel's face, though, at the beginning of the play. And it was Dahlin, right? So it was a guy that kind of was already in the Lightning's crosshairs. And he did this thing again, as we said earlier in the show. This didn't just come out of nowhere, right? Hagel just didn't lose his top for no reason. It was what happened and who the player was. But from the Buffalo side, they're like, throw away Hagel and, lock up Hagel and throw away the key is probably the mentality there.
I think we're getting some Buffalo fans who are listening to the show, and this one's from Dave, and I appreciate the comment, Dave.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Next time they play Sabres,
I'm complimentary of Buffalo fans.
Yeah, no,
I'm not getting involved in this.
Next time they play, Sabres will have a couple more heavyweights in the game. Can't wait to see the thumping.
Well, let me just say,
because they have Stanley coming in, right? I mean, he's a big boy.
Yeah, Logan Stanley.
Yeah.
I mean, he fights. I'm not sure that I don't see him play a lot. I know that he has had a great year. I mean, actually, because the Lightning were just in Winnipeg, and some of the Winnipeg people were like, I really hope they don't trade Stanley because he had been pulled out. Yeah, it's like he's kind of been slower in his progress than some first-round picks, but this was the year he kind of had a coming-out party, if you will.
Yeah.
I think he's 9 goals. He's set career highs. He's playing well. He's also a pending UFA. So Winnipeg decided to move him along with Luke Schenn. Luke Schenn can throw him, no question.
Very good.
So a couple of things. First of all, sometimes we have games like this, and then the next game everyone thinks it's going to be just like it, and it's not. Right? Now, the Lightning and Panthers have had this, where they had the brouhaha in the preseason, and they were like, what's going to happen in the first game? Actually, the first game was fairly quiet, but it was the second game that a lot happened. And I don't know what's going to happen on April 6th. The Sabres may decide to put – I thought that they handled themselves just fine last night. But, Schenn and Stanley are big, strong guys. If they happen to be in the lineup, that may act as a deterrent in a way. Or it just may be a sort of game where we're not going to see this stuff. I have a feeling both teams are going to go into that April 6th game wherever they are in the standings. And where they are in the standings may affect kind of how that game unfolds. But they're going to be like, we cannot give up as many goals as we did in the last meeting. So the priority may be less on putting your markings on the wall.
Yeah.
And more about let's make sure that we can defend, because if we play these guys in the playoffs, this is going to go both ways. We can't be giving up 6, 7, 8 goals. And for the Lightning, it's got to be a priority to stay out of the box. They have had problems on the penalty kill against Buffalo. Remember in the first meeting, it was Doan. I think it was Doan again. Doan's had a lot of power play goals for Buffalo, but the Sabres got a late lead in the first meeting when Doan scored in the power play, and Radish scored a 6th attacker goal to get the game tied. And then the Lightning, I think the Lightning also gave up a power play goal in the last meeting, if I'm remembering right. At least one. I guess I can look it up. But clearly their penalty kill has had problems with the Buffalo power play. So look, if you're the Lightning, you're like, we can't take unnecessary penalties. We can't give the referee an opportunity to put us short.
I would agree with that. By the way, this would be a heck of a first-round matchup.
Yeah, playoffs. I think both teams
are
looking at first place, and the only way they would meet in the first round then is if the other team falls into the wild card, one of the two. But
this is an interesting question, partner, and I don't know if we can dovetail into Toronto momentarily, because I think it's an interesting point. Greg says, what is your opinion on why Cooper didn't start Vasi last night? The Leafs game meant nothing, and Buffalo is by far a better team right now.
Well, hindsight's 2020. The Lightning entered the Toronto game having lost 4 straight in regulation. They absolutely needed to get a win.
I don't disagree. I don't
need
disagree
to end
with
that losing streak.
I would agree.
So from that standpoint, start Vasi. I think some people were wondering, would they play Vasi in both ends of a back-to-back? Like, that game was 22. The games were 22 hours apart. Vasi has played how many games in a row now? Johansson came in relief of Vasilevsky last Saturday, but in terms of starts, Vasilevsky had started, 5 in a row?
Yeah.
4 in a row? Like, it was a back-to-back. They're not in jeopardy of falling out of the playoffs. I mean, they were tied for first place with Buffalo. Look, if they won the game 7-5, nobody would have been coming on the show today and asking us why didn't they start Vasilevsky. I did hear some questions, though, and, even up in the press box, like, do you think they're going to start Vasilevsky again? I'm like, I don't, but I didn't know until Johansson led them out of warmups. Also, Johansson played pretty well against Buffalo in the relief appearance last week.
That's fair.
Remember, he made 16 saves on 16 shots in the second period. Yeah.
So I tend to agree with you. I think you needed a win. Your team
the Toronto
theoretically
game.
For the Toronto game, your team's a little fresh, a little more fresh maybe than last night if you believe in that second game of a back-to-back. So I understand that, and I would have done the same thing. Vlad says our forwards need to control themselves. They have to be strong, defend themselves, but not attract so much penalties. I mean, I would say that's stating the obvious for sure. And I think a game like that, I think people were surprised it was so one-sided with penalties.
Yeah.
Not saying I think we've all acknowledged if you want to give 7 to Tampa Bay, that's fine. But you have to have a willing participant on the other side a little bit when it comes to that. So,
well, I'm looking at the minors. So again, just to be clear, I'm not saying the Gergensen slash on Oslin near the end of the game wasn't a slash, but at that point the officials had put away the whistles. That was a little bit of a tough one, but if we're going to say, all right, was that an undisciplined penalty? It wasn't. Oslin's going to the net. He's trying to make a play to prevent a scoring chance. So you'd call that not a bad penalty to take, even though, again, stuff had been let go on both sides. In the second half of that game, they decided to call that one, and it benefited the Sabres, no question. I was a little, all right, so actually they announced it as roughing to Hagel. They actually gave him boarding, that one at the beginning of the game. So Radish slashed a Sabre and then got into a fight with Dahlin. So he got the extra 2, and that was deserved. There was a big scrum, but they gave an extra 2-minute minor to Hagel boarding. I'm not sure who he boarded. He must have come flying in, and they felt that warranted a second penalty. The Lightning weren't happy in this scrum, though, that they got the extra 2. But that goes to what the fan was saying, like discipline. Chernak got called for interference by the net. That was an avoidable penalty. He stepped, I forget who he knocked down, Norris maybe? Like, Norris didn't have the puck. So I mean, it didn't deny a scoring chance or anything like that, so I would call that an avoidable penalty, although the Lightning were looking to be physical, and so they got called for that. So that's 1, 2, 3. The Hagel double minor were 4 and 5, and then there was another one in here that I'm trying to find. I don't see it right now. McDonough got called for high sticking, maybe? Yeah, that was the other one. That was the one on which Zucker scored. So, stick fouls, extracurricular fouls, those are the avoidable ones. The Girgensons one, to the extent that it was called a penalty, that's a penalty you live with because the guy has a path to the net, right? Now,
Agreed.
are we going to, and the Bruins fans were making this argument after the Stadium Series game where power plays were lopsided in favor of the Lightning. Maybe they were not happy with all the penalties called in the Bruins. And a lot of them came one right after the other. As the Lightning got 5-on-3 after 5-on-3. But they're like, what about non-calls the other way? That is fair for last night. Did the Sabres only commit 2 penalties leading to Lightning power play chances? I think it is fair to say they had more infractions than that, but that goes to this thing about Girgensons. Like, the officials let some stuff go. So the Lightning might have had more than 2 power play chances. They didn't. That's the way it goes. At the end of the night, you have to kill those penalties, though. You can't allow 4 power play goals. You can't. And expect to win.
I would agree with that. I think it's all fair game. At Bolts Radio, if you want to get involved in these conversations, you certainly can. Mark says, when is Nick Paul coming back?
Yeah, Julian actually addressed that because he met with the media after the Perry trade. I think he said a week and a half or so. Gonçalves is close. Gonçalves has been skating. It's possible he could be in tomorrow. I mean, I don't know that for sure. The Lightning have an off day today. He's closer than Paul. Paul was not on the trip, but Paul is getting close, which is good news. By the way, Geeky had a very nice play on the Moser goal. I thought Geeky settled in this weekend too. He's another guy. He got more of a regular shift. He was playing mostly with Perry and Sabourin. I think Perry did a lot for the Lightning in just 2 games. Not only did he score 2 goals, he got into a fight too. Yeah. But he's so annoying to play against for the other team. I mean, he really is. Like, he's in front of the net, but he's also like, he's really strong on his stick. There was a play, and it didn't really mean anything. The game was out of reach. I think it was 5-1 Lightning at that point before Nick Robertson scored in the last minute. It was late in the game. Lightning have a 5-1 lead. Puck goes behind the Toronto net, and there's a Toronto defenseman there, and Perry just like wedges it off his stick. Actually, it was the side of the net, and I think Stolarz was trying to cover it. Perry wedged it free, went behind the net, tried to wrap around. It was on his backhand. He couldn't really execute the wraparound, but he went to the front of the net and he found the puck again. Then he had a little backhand shot. It was a chance. Like, he just has a sense about where to go, what to do. As Halpern said, because he was my coach after the first period in the Saturday game, it's like, he is so good below the dots, Perry. And he's like, as you get older, like, that's one thing that, you really don't necessarily lose, because it's not about speed, right? It's just about kind of smarts and like how to wedge your body to get the puck, win puck battles. And I think that having a guy like that on his line, talking about Geeky, helped. And Geeky had a great steal. He picked the pocket of Ostlund, who was trying to skate out of the zone. Seconds later, Moser scored to tie the game at 4. Right before Zucker scored the 7th goal, Geeky had a tip. And Luka he didn't make a lot of saves last night, but he made some timely ones, and that was one of them. That goes in. It's 8-6. Instead, he makes the save. McLeod springs Zucker. He has the angle on Destu, and he finished the breakaway. It was a big swing, right? Save at one end, breakaway goal at the other end. Got 7-7 now. But Geeky would have gotten that goal, right? Like that. It's good to see that he was in a position to deflect that puck.
No doubt. I'm glad you pointed that out because, we've talked about Geeky a lot, by the way, making plays, and that one was a fantastic
It was
one.
12-6, though, too.
Yeah.
So I think having more of a regular not shift necessarily, but yeah, maybe regular shift, but also the same guys with him on a regular basis. I mean, it seemed to help him. I don't know.
Buffalo Man says Hagel took the extra 2 minutes for the hit from behind near the dasher, which started the scrum. That's not even a little mysterious.
Well, I'm sorry. I did not see that on the replay. I was focused on Radish and Dahlin. All right, so maybe the penalty was warranted.
Yeah.
The Lightning weren't happy about it, though. I mean, I can tell you that. And there was, it wasn't like Radish committed a penalty and Hagel committed a penalty and that was it. Right? I mean, there was a lot of shoving going back and forth. But look, if he did that and the officials felt that warranted another penalty, it is rare to see 2 penalties called at the same time on one team, though, when you have a scrum like that. But that one didn't hurt the Lightning. They killed the 2-minute 5-on-3. And actually, Dahlin being in the fight hurt the Sabres. I mean, Byram's a great player. But I think the Sabres would have preferred to have had Dahlin out on the 5-on-3, but he was serving the fighting major.
Agreed. Let me pull up our favorite read of the day.
Yes, please
I'm going to get to in a second, but I want to get to this one as well. Brian made some good points the other night that the Tampa defense, let me see here, as my repeatedly being split up. Why can't the team recognize this? FKA mentioned that.
Well, when did Brian say that? When they were going 11-7? When they went to 12-6, and I'll just use the Toronto game as an example, because the Toronto game, they didn't lose a player to injury. You had Hedman and Chernak, you had Moser and Radish, and you had Destu and McDonough. I didn't think the Lightning had an A-plus defensive game, but it was better. It was better than the earlier games. And I think the 3 sets worked well. Now, the Buffalo game was different. Chernak didn't play the final 40 minutes, so they didn't mix everything up. But I actually... And again, I'm going to say this. I think it helped Destu. Like, Destu saw more ice than when they were dressing 7D, and I really felt he got into the flow of his game.
Yeah.
Understanding Zucker was his guy on the breakaway. So I'm not overlooking that. I'm just saying he played with some juice. That's the Destu that we saw prior to his injury. And I was glad to see that guy back last night.
I think we all were. Let's get to this. And tonight, enjoy some Reif Rum. Smooth, versatile, now pouring at Benchmark International Arena. Order a Tropical Wave or a Lightning Mule and taste why fans are switching. Reif Rum is a premium craft Florida local rum built on authenticity, quality, and easy drinkability. Ask Reif Rum by name. Go Bullets. Enjoy responsibly. You know, it was interesting. We talked about this on the last call last night. And I know Chief was talking about this team and the fact that it hasn't played particularly well and that it needs to set in. And, you know, if you don't do it now, when are you going to do it? And I think there are some valid points to that. To Eric's credit, and I brought this up to pivot, I said, look, does a team that has basically been very good for most of the season deserve the benefit of the doubt that right now they're struggling, but it will eventually work themselves out of this? And I think Eric's position was he kind of agreed with that take. I don't want people who are Lightning fans to look at this bad stretch and feel like all of a sudden this is a systemic problem and the Lightning are all of a sudden now not a very good team. Who knows what's going to happen moving forward? But if you're going to be hyperbolic in terms of your reaction to how they've played coming out of the break, isn't it fair to at least acknowledge what they did before and come to a rational discussion about where they are? They can still be a good team who are slumping. Those two don't have to be interchangeable. They can be spot on. And look, I've been a big believer, you know this on this show, Mish and everybody that listens, that I'm not sure it matters necessarily how well you're playing heading into the playoffs. I think it's nice to play well heading into the playoffs. I think if you had your druthers, you'd rather play well than not. But this Lightning team, I always feel like goes through something like this at some point towards the end of the year. I mean, we've had conversations, you know, the Lightning are kind of limping into the playoffs. They're not playing particularly well. It happens.
I remember in 2021, they kind of took care of business to get in the playoffs in the first, I mean, that was the 56-game season, maybe the first 20 games. They ended up finishing third. They were never in jeopardy of missing the playoffs, but I think people were worried.
Right.
Because we had our show at that point.
Right.
I mean, we'd been doing it for over a year at that point. Or I guess it was our second year doing it. Because we started basically before the bubble. And we had a lot of fans who were like, you know, they're not playing well. They're not playing championship level. And like, yeah, they aren't. Remember, they acquired David Savard. They tried to put him with Hedman. They lost like 7-1 in Nashville. It's like Savard was -4. They're like, why did they make this trade? Like, okay, they figured it out, right? They were also the defending champs, and they knew to elevate as we got into the playoffs. If I'm remembering right, didn't they finish with the final two? Because everything was played in like a series, right? So it was 2 games in the same city against the same team. And they finished with 2 games in Sunrise against the Panthers, and they lost both. That was one reason why they finished third. Maybe they're going to finish third anyway. And I think they were going to meet the Panthers in the first round. People are like, oh my gosh, yeah. And then they won the series. So this team's a little different. They're not the defending champs. They do have to figure this out. They need to get better defensively. They don't need to play as well. I guess this is your point. Do they need to be playing like airtight defensive hockey like we saw for much of their 19-1-1 stretch down the stretch here in the regular season? Not necessarily. They just need to get into the playoffs. Then once the playoffs start, they're going to have to elevate. They could be playing well down the stretch. When the playoffs begin, you have to elevate anyway.
I would agree.
And I know I've said this on the show a lot. The team that elevated right off the bat when the playoffs began last year was Florida. The Florida Panthers hit the playoffs, and they're like, it's on. Boom. We're going for the cup. We know where we need to be, and we're getting there. And they got there from the drop of the puck in game 1 against the Lightning.
Yeah, I would agree.
So, like, you do hear we want to be playing well going into the playoffs. You know, we want good habits. This team knows what the good habits are.
You know what that's like?
But they're going to have to do it. Like, they're going to have to show it. They're going to have to get in the playoffs. They're going to have to secure a playoff spot, which means they can't just sit here at 82 points the rest of the way. And then when the playoffs begin, whoever their opponent is, if they have to start it on the road, if they have home ice, whatever it is, whatever the situation, whoever the opponent is, they are going to have to elevate. And with any sort of luck that they haven't had a lot of this year, stay healthy.
This is what I'll say about wanting to end the season playing well. You know, for me, what that's turning into, we need to play a full 60-minute game. We need to play a full 60-minute game. You know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
It's you want to. Hard to do. And I don't think either one, particularly playing well towards the end of the year, means you're going to run through the playoffs either. I think we've seen enough of that evidence right here with the Tampa Bay Lightning to know, and this is a good thing, by the way, that if they're not playing particularly well, this team and the coach have a way of bringing out, for the most part, some pretty good hockey when it matters the most. So factor that all in. I want to get to, this is a really long question, Johnny. Maybe we can do that tomorrow, and I don't know, Steve, if there's a way we can save any of these, but he said back in the old days when the Lightning had a 2-goal lead in the third, you could chalk it up as a win, but they had defense back then. Last night, Chernak leaves the game again with an injury after a fight. How many games has he been on the ice this year? The Lightning are gifting with Florida and Toronto not making the playoffs. Let's hope they don't waste this opportunity because of lack of defense.
All right, so I can address a couple. I'm not going to address the Chernak thing. Look, I mean, sometimes players get hurt. You know,
well, and he fell awkwardly.
Yeah, it wasn't that he got popped, right? No. So, how many times have the Lightning blown a 2-goal third period lead this year? I honestly can't. I mean, there may be one. I can't remember. I can't remember, and lost the game in regulation.
Yeah.
Last night's game, I said this at the start of the show, and this is true for both teams. Last night's game was a singular sort of game. That game took on a life of its own. It was high emotion, high intensity, huge momentum swings. When you have huge momentum swings within a game, the team that doesn't have momentum is almost like paralyzed. Like they're not, but it's very, very difficult to stop what is coming at you. That's why I mentioned the Carrick goal, because I thought the Carrick goal started to shift momentum, and then the Sabres grabbed it, right? Credit to them. Like, they got that spark, and their game grew and grew and grew and grew and grew some more. And you could just see it. Like the last, whatever it was, 12, 13 minutes of that game, the Sabres were extremely dangerous. So this isn't just like, well, they blew a 2-goal lead, no defense. I mean, come on. I don't think they're second anymore. But, they're a top 5 defensive team in the NHL. They don't make a habit of blowing 2-goal leads. Really, if anything, the issue has been falling behind early and not being able to catch up. Or in December, they couldn't score. So they lose a low-scoring game where they didn't get enough offense. Last night's game was kind of a one-off to me. And maybe we're going to have another one-off on April 6th, which is what the fans are saying, like, the Buffalo fans that chimed in, and we appreciate their input, because it's always good to hear, like, from the other side, like, they're like, it's on, well, maybe it will be on. Maybe this will be another singular game on April 6th. Maybe it won't. But I expect that things are going to settle back to kind of normal regular season, games where, the onus is on the Lightning to get their game back closer to where it was pre-break and start getting some points. And, you and I believe that they're going to do that. And I do believe that we saw some good signs over the weekend.
I would agree.
For the Lightning that, I would have preferred that, they won both games. I would have preferred that they didn't give up 8 goals. I would have preferred that they didn't give up 4 power play goals. Sabres are a really good team. They can expose you. So let's give some credit to the other team. Understand that this game is now over, and look ahead to 3 home games this week where they got 3 really good teams. I think Columbus is going to make the playoffs. And you got Detroit and Carolina, who are currently in playoff position. This is a tough homestand. Lightning are going to have to raise their standard. But I saw a lot of good things over the weekend that hopefully they can build on and continue to kind of build their game and get back on the winning side of things. I went over there. Sorry, I said I would be short, but I wasn't.
No, you're good. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. Be a lot of fun. Lightning taking on the Blue Jackets. We'll have all the coverage here on the show, and maybe have a guest from Columbus as well. But good talks, partner. Way to go.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. All right.
That was a game and a half. That was a game and a half yesterday.
It was. It was fun to debate with you. Thanks, Steve Ersick, and all of you for listening. We appreciate it. We'll be with you again tomorrow. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.